Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty intense today. The Iconoclasm Controversy. It went on for over a century in the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah, a whole century all about religious images, these things called icons.
You know, it's wild. This wasn't just some, theological debate. This thing blew up, totally reshaped the Byzantine Empire. Politics, society, everything.
Okay, so paint me a picture. We're talking about the Byzantine Empire. What's that? Think Roman Empire. But it kept
Yeah.
going for like another 1,000 years. We're in the 8th century, and their center is, well, modern-day Istanbul. Tons of cultures mixing. Christianity is a huge deal.
Huge, yeah. And so you've got these churches, right? Beautiful mosaics everywhere. Then in people's homes, they've got icons, pictures of Christ, Mary, the saints, all that.
So basically, religious art was everywhere.
Exactly, and people used them for everything. Praying, feeling closer to God, you name it. But then some people started getting, well, uneasy. They were like, hold on, is this too much? Are we worshiping the actual image instead of what it's supposed to represent?
Ah, so that's where the controversy starts. Right. And remember, this is all happening while Islam's spreading like wildfire. And Islam, no images in religion, strictly forbidden. So some Byzantine leaders start sweating. They see this powerful new religion and they think, do we look kind of, I don't know, idolatrous compared to them?
Yikes. Talk about a PR nightmare.
Totally. So boom, 726 CE, Emperor Leo III drops the hammer, bans icons outright, orders them destroyed, gotta go, empire-wide.
Whoa, wait, seriously, it just wipes out all this art?
Yep. This is where it gets messy. We see how forcing everyone to think the same way, it never ends well. You had the iconoclasts, the icons are bad folks, thinking they were, purifying the faith. And then the iconophiles, they loved icons, saw them as part of their whole tradition.
Okay, so two sides clashing, but this wasn't just a war of words, right?
Yeah, it was a full-on crackdown. Imagine these stunning churches, stripped bare, priceless mosaics, smashed. Anyone who refused, they were imprisoned, exiled, you name it.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? These beautiful works of art gone, all because of this debate. It must have been a really intense time.
Intense is an understatement. And it gets worse. Leo's successor, Constantine V, he was hardcore anti-icon. He even held this council in 754, got the whole icons are bad thing officially condemned. It wasn't just about religion anymore. These emperors were using it to, grab more power, control the narrative, silence anyone who might challenge them.
So it went from a religious debate to a power struggle. Things just got way more complicated.
Exactly. But, you can't just stamp out centuries of tradition like that. People push back, especially in monasteries. They became like these safe havens for the icon lovers.
Makes sense. Monks, their whole lives revolve around faith. Icons were more than just pretty pictures to them.
Way more. They prayed with them, meditated on them, the whole deal. Destroying those icons, that was an attack on their entire way of life.
And it wasn't just happening inside the empire, right? There was that guy, St. John of Damascus, who was a major voice against this whole thing.
Oh yeah, John was crucial. He's writing from outside the empire, putting out these powerful arguments defending icons, his point. Venerating icons, it's about honoring what they represent, not worshiping the wood and paint. Like, think of how you cherish a photo of someone you love, right? You don't worship the paper, but it means something because of who it is.
So even with the crackdown, resistance was building. This was far from over.
Not even close.
Hmm.
In 787, Empress Irene comes to power. She's all for icons, calls this big council a Second Council of Nicaea, and they bring back icon veneration. You'd think, okay, finally, peace. But
There's always a but.
always.
Yeah.
814 CE, another emperor, Leo V. Guess what? Iconoclast. Round 2, this whole mess begins, and things get even more heated.
So even after a council ruling, the debate reignited. There had to be something deeper going on here, right? What else was fueling this back and forth?
Oh, there's way more to this story. The plot thickens, believe me. We'll get into all of that and the surprising resolution when we come back.
All right, so round 2, iconoclasm is back, even after a whole council said it was over. What gives?
Well, some folks, those flames never really died down for them. And Leo V, the new emperor in 814, he poured gasoline right on those embers. Hardcore iconoclast. Thought getting rid of icons was the way to get closer to God, purify the empire.
Okay, so we're back in the thick of it. But then things get really interesting because we get Empress Theodora.
Ah, Theodora. She comes in 843, and she's on the side of icons, just like Irene before her. But Theodora, she gets it. She sees that just switching things back won't fix the empire. It's been torn apart by this whole thing for decades.
She sounds pretty wise, so what'd she do? How do you go about fixing something this messed up?
Well, force wasn't going to work. Been there, done that. Theodora, she was all about tolerance, talking it out, finding some middle ground. She actually wanted both sides, icon lovers and icon haters, to like chill out and live together.
It's a pretty revolutionary idea, especially after all that violence and fighting. Did it work?
It did. This is what they call the triumph of orthodoxy. Huge deal for the Eastern Orthodox Church. Icons are back, traditional beliefs affirmed. It's like closing this long, messy chapter and starting fresh.
Wow. So Theodore basically brought peace to the empire. That's a pretty impressive legacy.
It is, and it makes you think, what can we learn from her? Tolerance, compromise, those are powerful tools, even today, when we're faced with these huge divides.
It's tempting to just want to win, right?
Yeah.
Force your side. But she showed that there's a better way. Strength comes from being able to live together, even with differences.
Totally. And let's not forget the whole Islam thing we talked about. Byzantium, they weren't isolated. This giant Islamic world, no images in religion whatsoever, that definitely played a role.
Right, like they were feeling the pressure, maybe even worried about how they looked compared to Islam, trying to prove they were the right kind of Christians. It's crazy how outside forces can shape things internally.
It is. But the iconoclasm controversy, it also shows us this deeper struggle, the kind every society deals with. Tradition versus change. Holding on to what's familiar versus letting go and adapting.
Yeah, you've got the icon lovers. They saw icons as this sacred heritage, a direct link to the past. They felt like getting rid of them was like erasing their history. And on the other side, you've got the iconoclasts thinking things had gotten too focused on the image itself. They wanted a purer, more spiritual faith.
Of both sides, they had a point, right? It's like that age-old question. How do you honor the past without being trapped by it? How do you stay true to your roots while still growing and changing?
That's something we're still figuring out today, I think, in so many areas of life. But Theodora, she somehow managed to pull it off. Respect tradition, but also allow for change. Find that balance.
She did. And it reminds us that there's not always one right answer. It's not always black and white. Sometimes the best way forward is to find that middle ground where everyone feels heard and respected. But this triumph of orthodoxy, it wasn't just about one person.
Right. We tend to focus on the big names, the emperors and empresses. But change usually happens because of a lot of people working together, often behind the scenes.
Think about it. Monks hiding icons, risking their necks to save their tradition, theologians writing these passionate defenses, trying to win people over with logic and argument. Everyday people, they never stopped venerating icons in their homes. They kept that flame alive.
Those are the unsung heroes, right? The ones who keep fighting even when it's hard, even when it seems like they're losing.
And don't forget those who were trying to talk to both sides, the mediators. They weren't in the spotlight, but they were crucial, creating space for dialogue for people to at least try to understand each other.
It shows that even in the middle of all this conflict, there were people working for peace, for unity. That's encouraging. But this whole back and forth, the emperors reviving iconoclasm again and again, that just made everything worse, didn't it?
Definitely. It created this cycle of resentment and violence that was so hard to break. It's like a warning, right? About how digging in our heels, refusing to budge, it can lead to disaster.
Yeah, it's like the more convinced each side became that they were right, the harder it became to even talk to each other.
Mm.
Which brings us to a question for you. What about today? We have our own ideological battles going on. Can we learn something from all of this?
It's worth asking ourselves, right? Are we falling into the same traps? Are we so focused on being right that we forget to listen, to try and understand where other people are coming from? Are we building bridges or just walls?
Because this iconoclasm controversy, it might seem like ancient history, but the questions it raises, those are still alive and kicking today. And in our final part, we're going to dive into those questions. What can we take away from all this, from this clash over images that ended up reshaping an empire?
It's wild, right? This whole battle over icons of the Byzantine Empire, it feels like something out of a history book. But then you start to peel back the layers and it's like, whoa, these are the same struggles we're still dealing with today. Totally. It wasn't just about the images themselves. It was about power dynamics, people's identities wrapped up in their beliefs, that basic human need to figure out what's right, what matters. The Byzantines, they were asking questions that we haven't really answered either. Like, how do we deal with people believing different things? How much should we let tradition control our lives? When's the right time to say, okay, the old ways aren't working anymore, we need change?
And those aren't just thinky questions. This icon debate, it had serious consequences. We're talking violence, persecution, a whole society getting ripped apart. It makes you wonder, what happens when we stop talking to each other? When we lose that ability to see things from someone else's perspective, when fear and intolerance, they kind of take over.
Yeah, it got pretty dark. But even in the middle of all that chaos, there were these sparks of, I don't know, hope. Think about Theodora and how she managed to bring back the icons. But she didn't just force it on everyone.
Right, she didn't just crush the other side. She understood that wasn't a real solution.
Exactly. She's like, okay, we got to find a way to live together. Tolerance, compromise, that's what she was all about. And it worked. The empire started to heal.
It's a good reminder for us, especially now when it feels like everyone's just picking a side and digging in. Maybe there's a better way. Strengths, real strength. Maybe it comes from being able to say, you know what, we don't agree, but we can still exist together.
100%. And it's easy to forget, but the Byzantine Empire, they weren't operating in a vacuum. You had the rise of Islam happening at the same time. That definitely played a role.
Right, they were feeling the pressure, like, do we look bad compared to them? Are we doing Christianity right? It's crazy how stuff going on outside can influence what happens inside a culture.
Totally.
Yeah.
But this whole icon thing, it also points to something deeper. It's that tension between tradition and change. We see it everywhere, even today.
Like, those who loved icons, they saw them as this direct connection to their past, their faith. Getting rid of them felt like, I don't know, a betrayal of everything they held dear. But then the iconoclasts, they were like, we've gotten too caught up in the physical stuff. We need to go deeper, focus on the spiritual.
Both sides with valid points, which makes it even harder. It's that constant struggle, figuring out how to honor where we came from without letting it hold us back, how to evolve without losing our roots.
Big questions. And honestly, I don't think there's any easy answer. But Theodora, she somehow managed to find that sweet spot. She respected tradition, but she didn't let it become a cage.
It's inspiring, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you look around today and everything feels so divided. It's like, maybe we can do that too. Maybe there's a way to find that balance where we can disagree and still move forward together.
I hope so. But this triumph of orthodoxy, we got to remember, it wasn't just one person. Yeah, Theodora made some big moves, but change like that, it takes a lot of people.
For sure. Think about those monks, hiding those icons, putting themselves at risk. The theologians, writing, arguing, trying to persuade people. And everyday people, they kept their faith alive, even when it was dangerous.
They were the real heroes, huh? Working quietly, sometimes even secretly, to make things better.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about those in the middle, trying to get both sides talking to each other. Those mediators, they might not get the credit, but they're so important. They lay the groundwork for peace, for reconciliation.
It gives me hope, that even in the worst of times, there are people who don't give up on peace, who believe in understanding.
It's powerful stuff. But it also makes you think about how things went so wrong for so long. Those emperors bringing back iconoclasm even after it was settled, that just poured fuel on the fire.
It shows you how dangerous it can be to be so sure you're right that you stop listening, that you'd rather fight than try to find common ground.
Yeah, that's the trap. And sadly, it's one we still fall into today. We think about our own lives, our own beliefs, how strongly we feel about things. It's easy to get stuck there.
So maybe that's the takeaway from all of this. The Byzantine Empire, it might be ancient history, but the lessons are still relevant. We got to be careful not to repeat those same mistakes.
We got to be willing to listen, even when it's hard, to be open to different perspectives, to understand that maybe, just maybe, we don't have all the answers.
And maybe, just maybe, the answers aren't about winning or losing, but about finding a way to live together, even with our differences. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the iconoclasm controversy. It's been a wild ride.